Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of the Gourley True Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, and today we have a man on that, wants to talk a little bit about one of my favorite subjects, which is Hall of Fames and how people are elected. And one of my favorite players when I was growing up was Dale Murphy of the Atlanta Braves. And I just recently read a book called Batting Clean with Kirk McKnight was the author. And I would like to welcome to the show today Kirk McKnight. How you doing, Kirk?
I'm good. How are you?
All right. And I think, and I always think this, and I always sound like an old guy saying it, but sports were a lot better when we were growing up.
Yeah,
They
I
just
think
were.
so.
Yeah. You didn't worry about the steroids and stuff. And, I mean, it was just a lot better world. And these guys that played back then seemed like almost mythical figures. And what exactly started your love affair with baseball?
Well, Dale Murphy. That's one of the reasons. That's the main reason I wrote the book. Was he's basically the main reason that I am a baseball fan today, and have carried on as a baseball fan for the last 36 years of my life. Is that as a 6-year-old, I watched Atlanta Braves baseball on TBS every day, and Dale Murphy was their best player. So Dale Murphy naturally was my favorite player growing up. So that's what introduced me into baseball. And then obviously I stuck around even after Dale retired and still followed teams and players. And, today my favorite team my favorite team is every team except for the Red Sox. And then my favorite player is Whit Merrifield. So, I've just had a love for baseball for like 36 years, and it all started with Dale Murphy.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about, because a lot of people don't realize, especially if they're older, his TBS was one of the first. It made the Braves, so you could see pretty much every Atlanta Braves game. And I know growing up, I was a big Reds fan, but I remember late 70s, mid 80s, anything around there. You'd get like 45 away games, you'd get 2 special home games, and that was it. And with the Braves, you could see pretty much everything.
Yeah. Yeah, WGN and TBS were my introduction to baseball, and I had Harry Carey calling the Cubs, and I had his son Skip calling the Braves. So it was kind of a nice little confluence, I guess you could say, of the Carey family in my childhood growing up.
Yeah, and I think, do you think a lot of the reasons that Dale Murphy doesn't get the respect that a lot of other guys was the fact you could see those games all the time, but those Braves teams outside of the 1981 team were not real good baseball teams.
Yeah, that's a lot of the arguments that the broadcasters I interviewed for the book made, is that it was a double-edged sword. You had the spotlight on you, but you were also playing for a horrible team. And anybody that can kind of look at the intangibles can see, what could he have done, honestly, had he had more players on base when he came up to bat. 55% of the time he came up to bat, there wasn't anybody on base. And only 29% of the times that he reached base did he score. So you have all those factors, and you're like, man, if this guy actually played on a competitive team, how much more inflated would his stats have been? And would we even be having this discussion?
Yeah,
about whether or not he belongs?
How many times did they put him on base because there's nobody else on that team too?
Exactly. Intentionally walked. He led the National League in intentional walks at least once, maybe even twice. And he got walked almost 1,000 times in his career, and so you think of those things and you just realize that there's not much of a threat outside of him. The rest of the team, there's not much of a threat. And so why not put the guy on base, give a free pass to a guy that could hit a home run and put the game out of reach, or bring the team that much more into reach.
Yeah, and the thing is, a lot of these Hall of Fame or Hall of Fames leave out guys that should be in. And I know one of the first guys I interviewed doing a show like it was Robert Brazil, who was the old great Houston Oilers linebacker, and nobody ever sniffed him getting in. All of a sudden he gets in, but he was a guy that belonged there. And a lot of the reasons why some of those NFL players don't get there is because the rules were a lot different. They didn't count sacks until the late 70s, early 1980s, and really a lot of that could be true here. And I know in your book, Batting Clean, you talked about it, just field dimensions, how the game, there's not as much foul territory, and it really changes the way things are done. Where, back then Dale Murphy may, pop out behind home, and if he's playing today, he's getting another swing because that ball's in the stands.
Yeah. I mean, and I think too many people have given way too much and focused way too much on his hitting. I mean, the guy was a tremendous fielder, and it was his third defensive position that he played in center field, and he won 5 straight Gold Gloves doing it. So, I mean, to me, it's just laughable that he didn't get in this time around because of all these factors, and it's laughable, constantly laughable to me, to think of all the things that he's contributed on and off the field, and he still does not get this love and this credit. I just don't get it. Everybody makes such a big deal about character clause. Everybody makes such a big deal of steroid abuse, and players that have these just ridiculous behemoth career numbers are getting passed on year after year because of their implications. And, you tend to sit there and say, oh, well, yeah, we have criteria, we have integrity, we have sportsmanship, we have character, we have contribution. Okay, well, Murphy excels at all 4 of them, and these 4 criteria, what are keeping these players that have these 2,000 RBIs for their career and 760 home runs, keeping them out of Hall of Fame? So why are we not considering these for somebody like Murphy? And that's an argument I make in Batting Clean. Like, I don't feel like his numbers, a lot of people call his numbers borderline, and you can call them borderline or not, but I don't think his numbers tell the entire story. And I don't think people are giving him nearly the respect and the credit he deserves just by thinking 398 home runs, 265 batting average. Well, 398 is not 400, and 265 is not 270. So let's take him off the list. I just don't get it.
Well, the thing that stands out to me with him is this: the 2-time MVP, and it could have been 3 or 4 times, but to be voted the best player in baseball on 2 separate occasions, to me, even if the numbers were borderline, that puts you above the borderline to me if you're winning 2 National League MVPs.
Yeah. These are all things that scream to people who know it. And I don't know if it just echoes or just doesn't echo, but, I sit there and think of the 16 on the Modern Era Committee, and I just can't believe, and I have to echo the sentiment of Curt Schilling. I thought that we got these veterans committees to fix the screw-ups of these years on the regular ballot. And he's got a point. These guys should know what makes a player. 6 of the people on the Veterans Committee are Hall of Famers themselves. 6 of them are executives. 4 of them are writers. So, you have 1/4, instead of being voted on by 100% writers, it's 25% writers now in this Veterans Committee. But still, it's still not giving them the love. It's still not giving some of these players the credit as far as, the accolades. Can we please look at the accolades? Can we look at the Gold Gloves? Can we look at the Silver Sluggers, the MVPs? The Roberto Clemente, the Lou Gehrig? Can we please stop and look at these and not look at just 2 facts and figures in a sheet? That's what I wish would have happened. And that was the whole point of Batting Clean, was please stop looking at 265 as a career batting average, because it really plummeted those last 2 or 3 years because his knees were giving out and he was done. He was on the tail end of his career. And included in that 265 batting average are the 2 or 3 seasons building up in his career before he started to really catch fire. I mean, he had 10 great seasons in there in the 80s and early 90s, or, maybe even late 70s into late 80s, but still, he had 10 good seasons, and that's what you're supposed to get. When you get a Hall of Fame consideration, did you have 10 good seasons? Well, he had 10 great seasons. So I just still don't get the snubs. And I'm an embittered person about it, but I still will not understand the snub.
Well, see, I'm a big Bengals fan, and Kenny Anderson's the one that always makes me mad, because he was the first guy to lead the NFL in passing back-to-back years, and he did it twice before anybody else ever did it. He took a team to the Super Bowl that wasn't very good. And I think that I've interviewed Ken before, and he's a great guy. He's quiet. He's humble. And that hurts you nowadays. And that's a damn shame that it hurts you if you're quiet and humble.
Yeah. I think that's what people even said that. They've even asked me, like, do you think it's because he's just a nice guy that's why they don't vote him in? I said, I don't know. And broadcasters that I interview for the book even said that. They said perhaps if he had a little snarl on his face, a little edge to him, maybe they would have given him that boost and all that. Maybe if he was a polarizing figure like some of the baseball players of today that get into the Hall of Fame, I don't know. I feel like it's very inconsistent, and it really needs to be remedied. I really feel like this Veterans Committee thing is kind of new, but I can already see the flaws in it. And it's not just because Murphy didn't get voted in. It's because, just different things. People obviously look at things different than the rest of the people look at.
Now, how did they go about choosing who was on the Modern Era Committee?
They usually, the last time, there was a lot of that, and that's one of the things that he got 7 votes 2 years ago. And I saw who was on the Modern Era Committee that was on it this year, and there was about 7 that were on it the time before. And so that really put a pit in the stomach feeling of me, because I thought, well, I doubt the 7 that are returning are the 7 that voted for him, So I'm thinking already that's 7 votes against him maybe. I don't know, but I don't know how they choose it, but I feel like that's there's plenty of executives out there there's 30 Major League Baseball teams. There is no reason to repeat some of these executives on the Modern Era ballot. That is incredibly flawed as it is. That's the whole point of these things. If you're gonna do that, then you better up the committee members to 32 or something, because we're still looking at 75%, and we're getting 7 repeat guys, and I'm pretty sure that most of them did not vote Murphy the first time, and I'm probably guaranteeing that they didn't vote him this time. So if you're going to do this and you're going to have this small of a committee, you damn well better stop using repeat committee members if you're going to do this, because that's the only way this is going to work. If this is supposed to be some kind of isolated panel where you choose, panel and committee members and things like that, then you shouldn't have the same committee members 2 times in a row. If you're going to have the same Modern Era ballot, for the most part, there are about 6 or 7 of those names were the same on 2 years ago. So you're going to have the same guys on the ballot for the most part, at least 60 or 70% of the guys on the ballot. Why are you going to have half the committee be the same too? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and if you look at Dale's batting averages, like I said, they're skewed from when he was real young and when he was real old. If you look at him at his best, which would have probably been, 82 through 87, when he was maybe the best player in baseball, you got batting averages here to start off at 281, 302, 290, 300, 265, 295. And that's with, averaging well over 100 RBIs and about 35, 36 home runs a year. Those numbers would be great at any time. But back then, those numbers were phenomenal. And I think that when people look at guys that played a certain era, to vote on them, you can't compare them to guys that played today or played in the last 15 years even. You got to compare them to the numbers of the guys that played back then.
Yeah, you do. And that's another thing. And the reason they do this committee is they're thinking, okay, by the time Murphy was on the ballot for the 15th year, most of those writers had no idea, had never seen him play. That's just 15 years. 15 years takes up a pretty big gap in your life. So if you're just starting as a writer on that 15th year of the ballot, you probably don't have experience watching Murphy play and things like that. And so what do you know about Murphy, What does this guy know about Murphy compared to the next guy? Oh, well, I have never heard of this guy, so I'm going to have to say no on this. That's just, I don't know. He stayed on the ballot all those years. He got just enough votes to stay on the ballot, but, you could tell it was just, he was so much, it was 2013, I think, was his last year on the ballot. And 20 years since his retirement, and 24 years since his last year of relevancy, if you think about it. Those years in Philadelphia, it wasn't relevant at all. He was either injured or really in the twilight years. And so, 24 years removed from his last year of relevancy, you're probably not going to be thinking, oh yeah, Dale Murphy Hall of Famer, to writers, especially the newer and the younger writers that are just coming up.
Yeah, and it's a shame. And I still think you get the new writers, they look here and they see 4 years in a row of 36, 36, 36, 37 home runs. And today, that's not a big deal. That's kind of an average player anymore in this juiced up era that we play on where everything's either a home run or a strikeout.
Yeah. I think Murphy, like you were even mentioning, we'll probably talk about my book, The Voices of Baseball, a little later, but one of the things I mentioned in Voices of Baseball, and many of the broadcasters I spoke with in Voices of Baseball, is that the ballparks are not the cookie cutters they were, especially in the National League. I think there was at least 4 to 6 cookie cutter style parks.
Oh yeah,
in the
you had
National League
Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and Montreal kind of was, but
St. Louis and Atlanta were too as well.
St.
They
Louis
were pretty
and
cookie cutter. And so you have those 15-foot walls. You have those dimensions the way they are. Those 15-foot walls are practically non-existent today in baseball, and those dimensions are come in quite a bit. In a ball, Riverfront versus Great American Ballpark, Murphy hits twice as many home runs.
Yeah.
Veterans Stadium versus Citizen Bank, another case. He hits twice as many home runs. What the other one? Pittsburgh. PNC Park versus Three Rivers. That wall over there in right field, they lifted it up, to the 21 to honor Roberto Clemente, the 21 feet. So it's a little bit of a challenging poke for a slugger. But yeah, those two alone, Pittsburgh, Cincinnati and Philadelphia, he would just absolutely demolish those ballparks.
Everybody else does. So somebody as good as he would definitely would. I mean,
yeah.
Come on. I'm a Reds fan, and I still watch occasionally. But to me, the game is not what it used to be because of what I talked about. It's a home run, it's a strikeout, or it's a walk. To me, you miss. I mean, I couldn't imagine a shift against a Joe Morgan or a Pete Rose or a Tony Perez where they just wouldn't smack the ball to where nobody was.
Right.
Because to me, that's just selfish. And that's where I think baseball kind of loses its lure because I'm not a big Pete Rose fan. I don't think he belongs in the Hall of Fame from what he did because I think it was written into his contract that, you do that, you can't. He did that. He shouldn't be able to. And the thing that always struck me is everybody always talked about how hard he played. But from what I remember in the 70s, pretty much in the 80s, pretty much everybody played that hard. I always took an offense to it because I never saw Johnny Bench or Joe Morgan or Tony Perez dogging it out there.
Yeah, and I totally get it, and that's why some of these guys aren't going to get in the Hall of Fame either. People have asked me about Barry Bonds. Do you think he should be in the Hall of Fame? I say no, because if Barry Bonds wouldn't have even cheated destiny. Like, let's face it, Barry Bonds was walking into the Hall of Fame his career began. He was walking into the Hall of Fame. Okay? Why would you test fate? Why would you play with fire? I mean, I don't know if you just want to be, because everything's tainted, everything's tarnished. You drop a little drop of ink into a little bit of ink into a water and things like that, and it could be a gallon of water, but the ink is just going to spread. So it's tainted regardless if it's a drop or if it's an entire thing.
Yeah, but I think also that comes down to money because he would have been a Hall of Famer, but he probably would have made millions less because once he starts hitting 60 or 70 home runs, and that's part of my problem with baseball now is with the juiced up ball, with the changing of the fields, the big allure to baseball is the history and the numbers. And those numbers have kind of been lost because of this.
Mm-hmm. I think you talk about the juiced up baseball. It's so funny to think in the record books, the most home runs hit in a year belongs to the Minnesota Twins by one over the Yankees. That's pretty much what sums up life right now in baseball,
Yeah. I mean, there was a point where, Babe Ruth hit 54 home runs in a season, and it was more than half the teams did in the entire major leagues.
Right. And and that's the thing. They're called the Bronx Bombers. Is there even a nickname for the Twins of last year? I don't know.
The Twins?
and
I don't know.
The nickname is the Minnesota Twins. And here's another thing. Target Field, and Target Field is not an easy home run park. And I know they play 81 games elsewhere, but that is not an easy home run park. And Yankee Stadium is an easy home run park as long as you get it by the foul pole, basically. As long as you get it to right or to left, you're not hitting it to center, it's a very easy park. So, but how messed up is it seemingly that a group of players from Minnesota, when you have all these just high profile names on the Yankees and they got beat by one home run by Minnesota, and I know there are plenty on the Twins that are definitely worthy of mention, and Sano and Garver and obviously Nelson Cruz and things like that, and Scope and all these guys. I mean, the list goes on, but they're not Judge, they're not Stanton, they're not these high profile names of the Yankees, and so. It really turns a bunch of heads right now, just seeing how much this ball flew out. And the fact that a team that's not known for its home run prowess in a park that's not known for its home run friendliness, as in Target Field, they end up having the record for most home runs in the season. And it's probably going to get broken. Let's face it. It's probably going to get broken within the next 2 or 3 years just because that's the way baseball is going.
Probably next year.
Yeah, this next year will probably get broken because the Yankees broke whatever record last year. I think it was the record of the Mariners that they broke last year. And then the Yankees record got broke with like 3 or 4 weeks left to go in the season almost. It was like 3 weeks left in the season and the Yankees mark from last year was already surpassed. It was crazy.
Yeah, that's why I think on the Modern Era Committee, everybody ought to have to be over 70 years old.
They do. And that's another thing. It's something that somebody brought to my attention after I wrote the book, is that, when Murphy was on the ballot, if you think about it, in 99, the first year he came out on the ballot, his highest home run total for a season was 44. It led the majors, but that was his highest total. He had 37s and things like that, and like you mentioned, 37 seems like a pretty regular number nowadays. Well, that first year on the ballot, you had somebody who had hit 70, and you had somebody that hit 66 that previous year. So that 44 for his highest home run total obviously isn't jumping out at these voters. They're like, oh, he had 44 home runs. Well, there's a guy that almost hit twice that last year. Okay. Well, and then a few years down the road, we start to see, oh, there's a cork in Sosa's bat. Oh, is it a coincidence that McGuire gained like 35 pounds the following year? Just all these different things. And it's like, but it's already too late. People have already thought, oh, yeah, 44 home runs isn't really that many. They were clean home runs, but they're still not that many.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing that stood out to me, 1983, and this is something you probably never see anybody do again, maybe the way this is going, but he hits 36 home runs and he steals 30 bases.
Yeah. Yep, and he was the sixth player in Major League history to go 30-30. That was something that was brought to my attention. And
how many have there been since then? Do you know that?
So many. Probably about 10 or 15, I would think.
And there was 6 through the first 100 years.
Yeah, exactly. 6 players.
Yeah, because I remember Eric Davis did it, about 1987 or so? I think that made him the 7th, and then after that, it seemed like everybody could do it.
Yeah, I mean, we probably had 3 or 4 guys this last year. We almost had a 40-40 with Acuna. And honestly, I think I'm pretty sure what's his name went 30-30 last year, Yelich, and I think he did the year before. So you got players like Mike Trout and just a few players that are like Jose Ramirez for Cleveland. Those guys are 30-30s, and it's just like it's almost like a handful of them every year now.
Yeah, and the sad thing is they don't take into effect when Dale Murphy did it. It was actually a huge deal because it was special because not many people were doing that at that point. And we talk about the Modern Era Committee, which put Ted Simmons and Marvin Miller in. What was your take on Simmons and Miller?
Well, I don't know. I'm not the sensitive type. So when you put somebody in posthumously, I feel like that shouldn't necessarily. I feel like there should be 3. If you're going to put somebody in posthumously and just kind of think, okay, this guy's going in, at least have 2 live people, okay? I know that's very insensitive, but it's true though. You're going to have two people in. I would think if one of them is definitely going to be posthumous, then we should have a third. and people probably don't agree with that. That's fine. But, a vote is a vote. But if you guys are sitting there, and these guys are sitting there in this table, and they're sitting there talking this for an hour or two, okay, I would think if you are going to put somebody in posthumously, give them the 13 votes or whatever it is, let's make two other guys show up. Let's make two other guys' days, please. Two living guys. Let's make their day. And Ted Simmons, I didn't really read up on Ted Simmons going into it. All I was doing was trying to get to each of the committee members. I was trying to get them a copy of the book once it was announced on that Monday before. I was trying to get each of them a copy, and I succeeded at 14 of them, not 16. But anyway, Ted Simmons wasn't even in my peripherals when it came to people that could have been a real threat to getting it over Murphy. Lou Whitaker was pretty high on it, but I did not see Ted Simmons as that threat. I saw Lou Whitaker and maybe Mattingly, but not really Mattingly. Honestly, a lot of people put a lot of steam on Mattingly because he played for New York and all that and blah blah, and his career batting average so good, having over a 300 batting average for a career. But if you look at Mattingly's numbers across the board, it's quite discounted, And I do think Mattingly eventually will get in the Hall of Fame. I think he's very deserving to get in the Hall of Fame. But I was thinking Lou Whitaker. I was thinking Steve Garvey, probably not, because he's been snubbed all these years just the same. Maybe I should have had that idea about Murphy. Murphy's been snubbed all these years just the same, just like Garvey did. If you look at Garvey's pedigree, you're like, why is this guy not in the Hall of Fame? Why was he not picked the first 10 years?
Well, I think that when I think of Lou Whitaker, I think he's one of the best I've seen at his position.
I definitely thought Lou Whitaker should have gotten it. Maybe it's just because it was first time on the ballot, but I thought for sure he was going to get it. Looking at his numbers, he definitely is deserving. He's definitely. I don't know. I have Tigers blood in me too because I was a big Cecil Fielder fan, but. And Trammell and Whitaker played, a little bit. That was the tail end of their careers. But, yeah, I look at Lou Whitaker. I'm like, yeah, Lou Whitaker to me is over Trammell. And Trammell's already in. So yeah. I thought, with Trammell getting in, you think Lou Whitaker's a shoo-in. Well, maybe it's going to be another couple of years before Lou gets in. And who knows before Murphy gets in. But Ted Simmons, like I said, was not even in my peripherals. And when I saw that, I thought, oh, my gosh. Because when they were sitting there talking about it, when I was watching MLB, on Sunday night, and they started saying the things, I already knew it wasn't Murphy when they said 24-year career and this and that, because I knew Murphy played for 18 seasons. So it's like I tuned out as soon as they said 24 years.
Well, how about this?
But I wasn't.
I grew up during this time, and if you asked me who was better, Ted Simmons or Thurman Munson, I would have said Thurman Munson.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I don't know. Maybe people just get too much in their minds. Maybe people think Thurman Munson, I think people say Thurman Munson more has the momentum because he died. And
yeah, but Thurman Munson's not a Hall of Famer. I'm just saying that I consider, because really Thurman Munson, if you look at his numbers, really had 3 tremendous seasons where he batted over 300 every year, and he hit, I think it was like maybe right around 15 home runs a year, but he drove in over 100. He was a catalyst on the Yankees team that won 2 World Series, went to 3 straight. Right. But other than that, I don't think he's a Hall of Famer either. Dave Parker, I think, has just as much right to bitch as most of the guys on there, if you just look at straight up numbers.
Yeah, I think people were saying that. Somebody even told me they thought that Dave Parker was already in the Hall of Fame. And with Thurman, I don't think Thurman's in the Hall of Fame just on his pure stats. What I was saying was that I think a lot of people just thought the fact that he died would just kind of carry him in. Roy Halladay was more than deserving of the Hall of Fame. Like, it wasn't even a matter of the fact that he died a year or so ago. Like, Roy Halladay had a Hall of Fame career. So, anybody saying that it was like Heath Ledger getting Best Actor because of in The Dark Knight. Heath Ledger deserved getting Best Actor for, first of all, he definitely deserved it. Just as much Roy Halladay deserved getting the Hall of Fame. Even if he hadn't passed away 2 years before, I would have put him in the Hall of Fame coming in on the ballot, for sure.
Yeah. I'd take Dwight Evans before Ted Simmons too. To me, when I look at Hall of Famers, I think Hall of Famers should be like the best players that ever lived. And when I look at that, Ted Simmons is not that. Dwight Evans is not that. Dave Parker was really good, but to me, he's not a Hall of Famer. Steve Garvey, really good. Lou Whitaker, I think's a Hall of Famer. Tommy John, great pitcher, great guy. I got to interview him. I've met him. He's not a Hall of Famer. You know, he's not up there with the Sandy Koufaxes and guys like that. Don Mattingly,
right.
Yeah, basically a singles hitter. Thurman Munson, you had 3 really good years. And people forget with Munson, 78 and 79, he was hurt a lot at that time, didn't even play that well or have that great of numbers. Dale Murphy, to me, is the one that stands out in this because when I watched Dale Murphy, I thought I was watching something special. When I watched these other guys outside of Lou Whitaker, I never really got that feeling.
And another thing is, I mean, diplomacy and ambassadorship is something that should be on everybody's mind. I think that players who are ambassadors to the game, who are ambassadors to their team, it's so important. It's so important that they retain that. There's just so much selfishness across sports and players. There are so many players that are just trying to, I mean, the Le'Veon Bell thing. Like, Le'Veon Bell was like, who is the publicist? Who, like, for these people? Like, who is not keeping these things under a bottle cap? Like, it's just crazy. Like, Le'Veon Bell doesn't come to the game, you know, sick or whatever symptoms, and then it gets leaked out that he was bowling the night before. Like, what is wrong with players who ask for this money, who demand this money? And I never, like, I used to be a Steelers fan. I don't even watch NFL football anymore, but when Le'Veon Bell was asking for this money and everybody's saying, you better just pay it to him, I thought, why? Why? The guy hasn't played a full season in 4 or 5 years. He's been either injured or he's been suspended because of substance abuse. Why do you feel like he deserves this money? Just because he asked for it? Is that really what we've come to in sports now, because they ask for it? And you see with Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell how smart the Steelers were to just cut the line and let and put new bait on the hook or something.
Well, the thing is this: once you lost all 3 of the big 3, your team became better. Because that's the one thing about football, though, is even if you don't have a lot of talent, you know, a group of 53 guys that are all on the same page can get things done. And Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, and Big Ben, all 3 are more of the problem in Pittsburgh. And I can tell you this, since the Steelers lost those 3, it has made me think a lot more of Mike Tomlin as a coach, because now I think he's actually allowed to coach the team instead of have to babysit 3 stars that are paying too much money to.
Yeah, and if I still even cared at all about football, I might still give Tomlin a little bit more credit. But since I don't, and I never gave Tomlin credit, I really do kind of consider more now the fact that he managed these players and these polarizing players, and I'm sure it was a handful. He had all the talent in the world on his team, but he sure had a lot of baggage too.
Yeah, and if he wanted to get rid of him, front office ain't letting you because they done paid him so much money.
Right.
So
yeah, exactly. But that's what leads to the ambassadorship. I think Del Murphy, a figure like Del Murphy, who's just so involved in the community, you don't win the Roberto Clemente Award just because you smile and sign autographs. Okay. The Roberto Clemente Award is to me, it's an award that demands a reverence from those who know what it is and know what it stands for. And Lou Gehrig Award too. But the Roberto Clemente, to me, shows that you have this level of ambassadorship that is unsurpassed. And there's 700 or however many players there are now. There's 750 or whatever players in Major League Baseball on any given day. And to basically be the one to get that award, the Roberto Clemente Award, shows that you have an ambassadorship that was not shown in the other 749.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks volumes.
Yeah, and the problem is when they bring up 2-time MVP, they don't throw the Roberto Clemente Award behind him.
Right.
Yeah, it always bothered me because Anthony Munoz, I'm a Bengals fan, which is why I don't like you now because I found out you're a Steeler fan, Kirk. But
Not
that's just,
anymore. Not
I know,
anymore.
but you
Don't even
used
care
to
about
be.
football.
You used to be. I mean, but, and Anthony Munoz, I think, was maybe the first guy to win the NFL Man of the Year in like 1986 or 87. And nicest guy I've ever met that was a former athlete. And I've met some great guys, so it's not like he's the only one. And when they bring up NFL Hall of Fame, they usually don't bring up the Man of the Year thing. And to me, that's a huge deal. And I've got a lot of people that hate me because I'm always on here banging against Pete Rose. But to me, Pete Rose was a singles hitter. He was probably the fourth or fifth best player on the Big Red Machine, and he was a miserable human being. And he bet on baseball, and I do know this. He said he was addicted to gambling. If he was addicted to gambling, he bet on his own team too, because if you're addicted to gambling, you're going to bet on what you know the best.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
so.
And I actually shook his hand a few weeks ago at the Mirage. He's here. He lives here in Vegas. I mean, I saw him at the Mirage just to say I shook his hand. But you know, people have asked me, "Do you think he's a Hall of Famer?" I said, I mean, me personally, like as a player, yes, but like it's just like we said. You know, when you play with fire and you try to cheat fate, this is what happens. And yes, obviously, walking into the Hall of Fame, he would, had he not made the errors that he did off the field and things like that, and made those lapses in judgment. And it's the same thing with these other guys that are getting passed on. And I say kudos to these writers who are passing on these players, because social media is putting the pressure on. You got people like Reggie Jackson saying it's time to let Bonds in the Hall of Fame, and I don't agree. And I wish Jackson wouldn't butt his head in on that. I respect Reggie Jackson. I respect him as an ambassador of the sport. I respect obviously his career, but do not sit there and put that social media pressure on these writers who are sticking to what they believe is the integrity of this game. If they feel that he should not be in, then he should not be in. That's why they have the power to vote. And if enough of them feel not, he's not going to get in, and it's all the more deserving that he doesn't. I have friends who are big-time baseball fans, and they say he should be in anyway. You know, they said, let him in. I'm like, no. If he would have just ran his course and did what he did, he would have been in the Hall of Fame. Probably would have won a World Series. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe not. But I just think that the baseball gods are bowling up there, and there's thunderstorms up there, and I think it's only fitting that these guys don't get in every year.
Yeah, I just hope that 50 years from now, when we're long gone, that it hasn't become such a normal occurrence that maybe it's not even illegal anymore, and then all of a sudden everybody's letting everybody in, and you're still leaving out Dale Murphy, who 50 years from now nobody remembers because of this.
I mean, if you want to throw a wrench in this, and I mentioned this before, if you want to really make a room go silent, get about 50 ball players in there and say, okay, raise your hand if you bet on baseball, or if you've ever bet on baseball. And there won't be any hands raised, but I guarantee you the feeling in the pits of the stomachs of those 50 players is probably overwhelming, because, like, let's face it, it's just so readily available. Like, it's kind of like, don't ever get on those websites and type in your address to find out who the sex offenders in your neighborhood are.
Oh, yeah, there's like 30 of them on your street.
Yeah, you just don't want to know this information. It's like, it's just the same thing. Like, don't throw that chicken into the fight.
Oh, yeah. Every street we've ever lived on, my wife will look at it. I don't look it up. I'm going to look it up. There's like 6 sex offenders within like 10 minutes of us. Well, it's like that on every street you live on.
Right.
But I guess, is the old saying that I hate when people say it is what it is. But I want to thank you for coming on today. We're going to have you on again to talk about go ahead and plug both your books right now. Tell everybody where they can get them. I've read Batting Clean. I've just started the other one about the broadcasters, and I highly recommend both of them. But Kirk, go ahead and tell everybody where they can find it.
Well, you can find them on Amazon. That's the best bet. Batting Clean's only $2.99. The Voices of Baseball is a little bit more, but it's available in paperback and hardcover. It's probably just the same. It's available in Kindle too, but the prices on Amazon, the Kindle is almost as much as the paperback. So you might as well just get in paperback and have a nice little book for your library. But yeah, they're both available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere books are sold online. Those two are available, and they're available in Barnes and Noble stores across the country. Sometimes they'll have a copy or not, but you can find them in Canada too. But I say always go with Amazon or Barnes and Noble if you don't want to sit there and waste your gas money driving out to the Barnes and Noble that's near you that might or might not have it. So I just go Amazon.
I think they shut all the Barnes and Nobles around me down.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's why I usually just jump right to Amazon, because BarnesandNoble.com sells them too. But Amazon, most people in the world are Amazon Prime members, and they get it free shipping and get it right there within a day. You can get it in hardcover. The paperback, I recommend more because it's about 12 more pages of information on the paperback. More interviews with Dick Enberg and Joe Buck added to it, and Pat Hughes of the Chicago Cubs.
Have you ever gotten a chance to talk to Dale Murphy about the book, or has he given you any response about it?
He's very grateful. He's thanked me. But the one thing about Murphy is that he doesn't want people thinking he's tooting his own horn, and I never wanted anybody to think that either. And so I made it very clear, if you read the first page of the book, that he has nothing to do with the book. But, you know, he is grateful for it. But like I said, he doesn't want to sit there and make it look like he's campaigning for himself. You know, and honestly, nobody would begrudge him if he ever did. But he definitely doesn't want that appearance of him campaigning for himself. So, I mean, he's thanked me for doing the book. He's shown his appreciation. But like I said, he kind of has insulated himself from me just to the fact that, you know, he doesn't want to look like he's doing his own campaign. And to be honest, a lot of the guys I talked to, even asked, they said, well, what does Dale think about this? Because they know Dale, and they know that Dale's not the kind of person to lead his own charge. But they were happy to do it. You know, they were happy to pitch in and to tell the tale of Dale.
Yeah. And, I mean, Dale Murphy, to me, great baseball player. I was a Reds fan. They used to compete against the Reds in the National League West all the time, believe it or not. But
yeah, it's so weird.
Yeah, you had Atlanta, Cincinnati, Los Angeles, Houston. I mean, I don't even know why they called it the West.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the Padres and
Pirates.
The Giants too, and were the Pirates in the West too?
No. Who was I thinking? Padres. I was thinking Padres, Giants. The Pirates were in the
Padres.
East with the Chicago Cubs, who were not East, but they were in East, if you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah, I never understood Atlanta being in the NL East or NL West. That year, I mean, obviously in '93 when it was the Braves against the Giants.
And they both won like 102 games or something.
103 and 102. Yeah, San Francisco 103 and Atlanta 100. Or Atlanta 103, San Francisco 102, and San Francisco goes home for the summer. And they lose the National League West to a team that's 3,500 miles away.
Yeah. All right. I think the story with that had something to do with when Atlanta came into the National League or something, and that was the opening they had, so they put them there. I don't know. We'd have to do a separate show on that and research it. But, hey, Kirk, you want to tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter?
Yeah, at the Voices of MLB. That's MLB is in all caps, so you can find me there. I think it's at the Voices of Baseball on Instagram, but definitely find me at the Voices of MLB on Twitter and follow me, and I'll follow back.
All right, guys. I want to thank Kirk for coming on. Make sure you go to Amazon, check out his book, Batting Clean, about Dale Murphy, especially if you're a younger baseball fan. It might give you a little bit more perspective on what us old farts are talking about when we bitch about the way the game is now compared to the way it was when we were younger. And I guarantee you this, 30 years from now, you're going to be sitting around talking to your kids and your grandkids about how much baseball was better today than it is 30 years from now. So it's just something that comes around, goes around. So remember, guys, you can follow us on The Grilly Truth on any podcast platform you can find, including Spotify, Spreaker. I've done too many shows today, Kirk. I'm getting tongue-tied.
Yeah.
Spotify, Spreaker, YouTube, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, basically wherever you find podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Kirk McKnight, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.